Hey folks, Papa Boris here, playing some more Leaders, or rather reviewing another Leaders game. This was the second game from the first Hunter of Kings tournament, and we're up against ShadOwl. Now, my opponent has a low rating here. However, do not be deceived. I was really nervous going into this game because clearly this person was having some kind of awakening with Leaders. They had beaten a player rated like 388 or something in the first round of the tournament, and then they'd beaten a high 200s player, Cat Dragon, whom I had actually played before and was a pretty good player. I checked those games. From what I could tell, they were just normal games. This person just like beat their much higher rated opponents in a long, honest pair of difficult games. So I was actually very nervous, like what the heck is going on? And I really had no idea how strong this person was because it seems like they had some kind of a breakthrough. It wasn't like, by the way, that they had like played very few games and maybe there's just like a really strong person just beginning to climb elo. Like, no, they had played a lot of games, so it seems like something had just clicked, and I was really afraid of being the next high-rated player on the chopping block. So I'm first here. I do get a very strong start. I grab the Royal Guard, but my opponent also gets something very strong here. There's a Bruiser and a Jailer to be taken, which means if I don't get a Protector, my opponent would be rocking an unopposed Bruiser. I was curious to see if my low elo player would notice this. My opponent took the Bruiser and then took the Brewmaster, so my opponent did not take the Jailer. This is a pretty strong start here. After summoning the Royal Guard as close as I could to my opponent's leader, I went into the tank, and I decided to make a little bit of a deliberately suboptimal move. So I'm trying to think, okay, how could this person be beating these really strong players in long, honest games while still having such a low elo and having had played a significantly large number of games of Leaders? And I thought, okay, maybe if there's one place where like the elo could be shining through, it's with some drafting choices. I think that, just about anybody would know that the Claw Launcher is good here. So if I take the Jailer, which is what I think is the strongest move, I think you just have to take the Jailer here to go against the Bruiser. But then my opponent gets the Claw Launcher, and then it's a whole game. If I don't top deck anything good, I'm going to be playing with the Rider. My opponent's going to have better pieces, Bruiser and Brewmaster and Jailer. Like, definitely I would pick the Jailer here. And in fact, I probably should have just taken the Jailer anyway. Like, yes, Jailer and versus Brewmaster, Bruiser, Claw is rough. It's just only one piece that cancels abilities against three pieces with active abilities. But having been on the receiving end of many Jailers, I think that maybe that is something I should have just dealt with. I should have just played defensively, tried to stabilize, and then found some way to poke out an advantage using my pieces. But I decided to push for something a little bit more. Since my opponent does have a bit of a slow start, I decided to grab the Claw, which is just so tempting here. The Claw can now pull up to my Royal Guard, and then I establish the center. I do think the center is very valuable in Leaders. It's one of those things that, like, seems like it should have been obvious to me this whole time, especially since I was a chess player as a kid. You think I would know that being in the center is good, yet somehow it wasn't until relatively recently that I figured out that controlling the center is very strong, because from the center, you're never very far from the opponent's leader, and ultimately that gives you more opportunity to make strong plays and box your opponent's leader in. So here I was thinking I'd take control of the center and just pray that my opponent takes the fun Rider over the sort of boring Jailer. But I think that's a mistake, and I think that, we'll never know, because I get lucky. I make a mistake. I make a deliberate mistake in drafting, but I get lucky and the Protector pops out. So now the Jailer is less appealing because my opponent knows I can still take the Protector and block his Bruiser. So here, he pushes his Bruiser up with the Brewmaster, a move that I've been known to make myself, tucks the leader back in the corner, and then he doesn't decide to take the Jailer or the Protector, he just takes the Rider. So I think in my opponent's shoes, I would have taken the Jailer there, but you could make a case for taking the Rider instead because the Protector has showed up. Would my opponent have taken the Rider without the Protector on the board, which would have been a definite blunder? We might not know. In any case, I decide to step back with my Royal Guard, pull up the Claw this way, step up with my leader, and then I do take the Jailer. I don't want to dick around any more than this, and I put the Jailer down to have a match for my opponent's three active pieces, but especially the Bruiser. Now, I could have done, this. I could have kept the Royal Guard there and had my Claw here, but I decided that I would just go for like a slightly less aggressive grab of the center. The idea is that after my opponent, comes into the center with the Bruiser, my Jailer is quicker there to meet him. I don't know if this has any merit whatsoever. I think just taking the center more aggressively would have been completely fine. So my opponent rides down with the rider, decides actually not to shove my royal guard. Instead, he just moves up with the bruiser and puts the brewmaster behind it, which is actually very reasonable. Here in the middle, the bruiser would look very cool indeed, but the jailer is coming up to meet him, whereas now he has this sort of like potential energy of the bruiser being next to the brewmaster. So that's like a fairly, high level of thinking, in my opinion, avoiding the easy shove with the bruiser, staying out of the middle, but keeping that potential energy going. Now, my opponent has his choice of good pieces. The Vizier and the Illusionist are both really solid. He decides to grab the Vizier. I think would have taken the Illusionist here. Since my opponent took the Jailer rather than the Protector, the Illusionist works pretty well. And in some cases, the Illusionist can be used to threaten to swap out the Jailer to allow the Brewmaster, or frankly, any of these active pieces to do their business. But you know me, I love the Vizier. That's also perfectly fine. And so now what do? Well, I decide to move away from the Bruiser, and I pull up the Jailer with the Claw. That's actually something I could have done last time as well. I didn't actually mention this because I forgot about it. But yeah, putting the Jailer here in line with the Claw allows me to get the Jailer centralized. And thus, if the Bruiser had been here, the Jailer would have been on it instantly. As it is, I have to be a little bit cautious to make sure I don't get checkmated here. But this is safe because the Bruiser can come in and touch my leader. But the Bruiser, in order to come in here, has to push my Royal Guard back here. And as a result, my leader is safe, and there's no way for my opponent to get anything near my leader, even with the help of the Brewmaster. But this is a move that you have to think about very carefully, because I am quite close to being checkmated here. If, for example, my opponent could push the Royal Guard back this way, then the leader would just step in and be the second checkmating piece. So I don't actually move my Jailer or my Royal Guard. I could have moved the Royal Guard, but I decided to just keep it where it is. Again, I'm kind of baiting my opponent to let his Bruiser get stuck to my Jailer. And then I get the Illusionist in this diagonal along the same line as the Bruiser, so if my opponent's not careful, I could knock the Bruiser to the edge of the board and essentially take it out for a while. Alright, so the draft is just finished, and I was really curious to see what my opponent would do now in this middle game, because as we saw in the previous game, my opponent outdrafted me, but made a crucial mistake on the first turn of the middle game, didn't position his pieces properly, and then his position instantly fell apart. So I was curious to see how this even lower rated opponent would do, and I think he did pretty well. So what he does here is he kicks the Bruiser up with the Brewmaster, and then rides in with the Rider like this, and just steps in with the Bruiser like that. So now he's got this very scary piece stuck to my leader. It's out of the way of the Illusionist. The Rider, yes, it can't ride anymore, but from here, maybe riding wouldn't have even been that effective. So he's just slowly moving around, and by having this piece here with the Bruiser already stuck to my leader, it's making it difficult for me to manipulate my pieces and form some kind of an aggressive front. He also starts moving in with the Vizier and keeps the leader on the side of the board. So now, what do you do here? This is your first real turn of the middle game. What would you try? Alright, so I don't know that this is like the best move or anything like that, but the move that I came up with here to develop my game with, some pieces closing in on my leader, and me being the one without the Vizier. I tried this. I stepped back with my leader, and I swapped with my Royal Guard to centralize my Illusionist. Maybe not the best person at using the Illusionist, because I've seen strong players do just incredible things with those characters, the Illusionist, Manipulator, the Claw, the positioning, getting them on the right lines at the right time. Maybe it's not correct to cash out the Illusionist's ability to shoot down the side of the board just for the centralizing move. But I decided that this would allow me to reposition my Royal Guard here and form this nice wall. Now my leader is safe. I've invited and isolated the Rider. The Bruiser is stuck to the Jailer. The Brewmaster can't really do much and is currently not even near a piece. And maybe now there's some way that I could start, pushing my pieces towards the leader. I do have a bit of an edge in that regard because my opponent is playing one piece down since this Rider has been invited and isolated. That was my thinking. Now, why didn't I put my Royal Guard there? To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. I don't think the Royal Guard is doing anything here. There's no enemy piece that can go here. From here, the Bruiser can't shove it because it's next to the Jailer. So I really just think I conceded this space to my opponent's Vizier for absolutely no reason. That was a misplay. Oh, did I reset my position to notice it? No, I put it over here. Okay, interesting. So from here, we're forming kind of a blob where I can maybe swing it to the other side later if needed, or I can just like have my pieces form this like battery and try to shove it through the middle and try to force some kind of a checkmate against my opponent's slippery vizier-fueled leader. I'm actually not sure this is correct. I think maybe just sticking it here would have made more sense, but sometimes these kind of blob formations can be effective. So now I sat back and I was very curious to see what my opponent would do. Well, he puts the rider in close to my leader, starts moving the bruiser around, puts the leader over there, gets the vizier to form that spot on the wall, and then puts the brewmaster there. Now it's interesting, my opponent could have put the vizier here and kept the bruiser here, but the brewmaster doesn't really work that well. Like, yeah, you can kick the bruiser that way, but then there's still nothing to bruise. So I kind of understand maybe wanting to have the bruiser be the one going around while the vanilla piece forms a part of the wall. I'm not sure. So my opponent is maintaining some pressure here. Every move is critical. What would you do if you were me in this position? So here is where I decide to bring my Royal Guard around and get it close to the enemy leader. I'm not 100% sure that my opponent picked the best spot for the leader because, you know, here it's kind of hemmed in. One of the best things about the Vizier is having a flexible leader who can change where he is. So if the leader had been kind of more in this area, then it would have some options. But as it is, it's now kind of pinned beneath my Royal Guard, and it's going to take an extra turn for it to get back out into open space. I move with my leader. I reposition the illusionist there and put the claw in its place. So the point of this maneuver is that by keeping my illusionist away from the wall, I'm kind of X-raying this line and threatening to swap in to with one of my opponent's pieces and then get close to the enemy leader. Now, that would require the Vizier to be here, which would put my leader in checkmate. So I'm not 100% sure this was the correct line. The simple thing, of course, with my claw would have been to just start walking it and see if I can get it around the leader. You gotta get around the wall near the enemy leader. But this way, at least my opponent's leader can't end the turn here. Although he could just move here, and then swapping with the Vizier is not a checkmate, and then the Vizier going here is checkmate. So I'm not 100% sure that that was the correct play. In any case, I keep everything else the same. Watch to see what my opponent will do. My opponent moves with the rider a little bit, starts bringing the bruiser around, reforms the wall here, and starts running back with the leader. But notice time was lost. My opponent could have already had this leader here and been going somewhere else. Granted, with the claw and the illusionist pointing down these lanes, it's hard for the leader to cross through, even with the help of the Vizier. So now I step back, step up with the claw, and I swap with my opponent's brewmaster for checkmate, and the game ends. So it was a little bit of an anticlimactic finish. My opponent did play a pretty good draft, and as far as I can tell, did a decent job in the middle game, maybe even outplaying me a little bit, but he did miss this tactic. I wasn't playing this, by the way, because he was low rated. I was treating my opponent very seriously. The point of this was to stop the leader from being in these squares, and then force him to stay on the edge. But my opponent missed it, and I managed to get a lucky checkmate. Otherwise, who knows? This could have been a very tricky game with these pieces coming around and it being unclear how I was going to press the advantage against my opponent. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and or subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.